They said the desert don't keep secrets, but sometimes it buries them so deep, it takes a broken soul to dig them out. He wasn't looking for anyone that day. Truth is, he hadn't been looking for much of anything in a long while. Wade Mercer rode alone, the kind of man who preferred dust to conversation and silence to comfort. Folks around Dry Mesa whispered he'd once had a wife, a child, maybe a home, but no one asked, and he never said. Just rode from canyon to canyon like a ghost, still clinging to the edge of something he'd lost. The sun was high, merciless. Even the buzzards seemed too tired to circle. Wade had just watered his mare at a cracked arroyo when he saw it something that didn't belong. Not tracks, not bones. A flicker of white, torn fabric flapping in the wind, snagged on a cactus. He didn't expect to find her. Not out here. Not like that. She was chained to a post driven deep into the sand, wrists red and raw, skin sunburnt, lips cracked. Her hair hung in tangled clumps, face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat someone must have dropped over her head to give her shade, though not near enough. And still, somehow, she was alive. He didn't speak right away. Didn't even dismount. Just looked at her, like if he blinked, she might vanish, and he'd go back to thinking the desert was nothing but wind and heat. But she raised her head, barely, and said with a dry whisper, "You ain't him." "No, ma'am," Wade said softly. "I surely ain't." He pulled his canteen from the saddle and knelt beside her. She drank like someone who didn't trust it wasn't a dream. He didn't ask what happened. Not yet. He just pulled out a crowbar from his saddlebag, knelt again, and started working on the rusted chain. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered again. "He'll come back." "Let him," Wade muttered, prying the shackle free with one sharp grunt. "I'll be here too." She didn't answer, just leaned into his shoulder for a brief second, before she passed out cold. He laid her across his saddle and walked beside the horse all the way. Back to his cabana, Turum Place, tucked up against the Red Rock Hills, where the wind whistled low and the stars came out clean. That night, while she slept on his cot, he built up the fire, fed the horse, and sat by the window with a rifle on his knee. He didn't know her name, didn't know why someone had left her to die out there, but something about her silence twisted inside him, like a memory trying to claw its way up through the years. In the dim orange glow, her face softened. Dirt still caked her cheekbones, but there was something beneath the grimes, something strong, familiar, almost like he'd seen her once, in a life before the desert swallowed him whole. When she finally woke, sometime past midnight, her voice was steadier. "Why'd you help me?" Wade looked at her for a long moment. "Because someone once left me out there too. Ain't forgot what that felt like." And for the first time, her eyes met his. And neither one of them looked away. "Ever found something in the middle of nowhere that changed your whole path? Let me know down in the comments. And if this story stirred something in you, stick around. What's coming next might just surprise you." Come morning, the desert was still, like it was holding its breath. Wade rose early, as he always did, feeding the horse first, then fixing coffee in the old tin pot that hissed like a snake over the coals. He didn't speak much, not even to himself, but today, there was someone else sitting silent by the fire, her frame small beneath the oversized blanket he'd wrapped around her. She looked better in the light, less like a ghost, more like someone just barely hanging on. But there was a sharpness behind her eyes, a fire not yet gone out. She didn't ask where she was, just stared at the flames, hands cupped around the warm mug he gave her. And after a long while, she finally said, "You're not like the others." Wade didn't look at her. "Don't know who the others are, ma'am. The ones who think women can't fight back, who think they can take what ain't theirs and leave you like a broken horse on the side of the trail." He set down his cup slowly, still didn't ask for details. She'd speak when she was ready. He knew that kind of pain, the kind that needs time to come up through the throat without breaking you. So instead, he said, "Well, you're safe here." She gave a small, tired laugh. "Ain't no such thing." He let that sit. The wind whistled against the cabin walls like it always did when a storm was thinking about coming. After breakfast, he went out back to chop wood, but he didn't get far. She followed, wrapped in his old wool coat, her eyes scanning the hills. "You're expecting him, aren't you?" she asked. Wade nodded. "Folks don't chain someone up and just forget." She hugged the coat tighter. "Then, I should go." Wade looked at her, really looked that there was no way she could ride yet. Barely stood straight. But more than that, she had the look of someone who'd spent too much of her life running. "You go, you die," he said quietly. "That's not a guess." She turned to him, lips trembling, but her voice didn't shake. Then he'll come here, and he'll hurt you too. Wade didn't blink. Ma'am, you don't know me. Her eyes narrowed. Maybe I do. That stopped him. He wiped sweat from his brow, stared at her, and said, You think we've met? No. But broken things recognize each other. He couldn't argue with that, so he said nothing, just handed her the axe. She looked at it like it was a test. Maybe it was. You ever chop wood? He asked. She gripped the handle, stepped toward the log. No, but I can learn. She swung awkwardly at first, missed once, but by the third try, she split it clean down the middle. Wade didn't say a word, just nodded once, then went back to work beside her. That evening, after stew and silence, she spoke again, this time in a whisper like a confession. He said I reminded him of someone he lost. That's why he took me. Wade's hand clenched around the spoon. He kept saying it wasn't my fault, then punished me like it was. The room felt colder, even with the fire crackling. Wade didn't offer pity, didn't try to fix it, just sat there, letting the truth hang in the smoke-filled air like a ghost that needed seeing. Before bed, she asked, What's your name? Wade, he said simply. She paused, then gave the smallest nod. You can call me Rose. He nodded back. Good night, Rose. She stood in the doorway for a while longer, staring out at the moonlit hills like they held all her missing years. And just before she turned in, she said something that stayed with him long after she closed the door. I don't know if I'm grateful you found me, or terrified of what it means. He didn't sleep much that night. 2 days passed. Rose didn't say much more, but her eyes had begun to rest a little longer on the fire, and her hands didn't tremble when she held her cup. She slept lighter now, ever through the whole night, but she no longer jolted awake, screaming. Wade noticed the change in her step, in the way she touched the wood stove, like she was learning how to belong somewhere again. Still, she never asked to stay, and he never asked her to leave. They lived like that quietly, like the desert itself, until the flour ran low, and the horse needed new shoes. Wade saddled up and told her he'd be gone before dusk, back by sundown. She only nodded, standing in the doorway, wrapped in that same wool coat, the one that used to belong to someone he never spoke about. He rode into town just as the heat began to settle and the shadows started stretching long across the sand. Dry Mesa was small, just one strip of buildings clinging to a dry well and a few stubborn cottonwoods. The general store still smelled like dust and beans, and the clerk still greeted folks with a cough before a word. Wade grabbed salt, jerky, flour, a bit of tobacco, and a bottle he didn't plan on drinking, but needed close by. He didn't speak more than he had to, just nodded at the faces he recognized and avoided the ones that looked like they remembered him from before. As he stepped out, saddlebags full, he paused. The ridge behind town, just beyond where the red hills rolled into scrub and sage, there was a man, just a figure, really, standing too still for too long, looking west, right toward where Wade's cabin sat, tucked between two canyons. He narrowed his eyes. The sun glared off the man's belt buckle. Even from this far, Wade could feel it, danger waiting. He rode slow on the way home, took a back trail he hadn't used in years. Didn't want to lead anyone straight there. By the time he reached the cabin, the sun had dipped behind the cliffs, casting long purple shadows across the land. Rose was chopping wood again when he arrived. She looked up and froze when she saw the tightness in his jaw. You saw someone, she said flatly. He didn't answer, just unloaded the bags and handed her a small cloth bundle. What's this? She asked, unfolding it. Inside was a tin hairbrush, a bar of lavender soap, and a strip of dried apple wrapped in twine. Figured you might need a few things, Wade muttered, setting the rest of the supplies down. She stared at them like he'd given her gold. You didn't have to. I know. She looked at him long. Something shifted behind her eyes. He's close, isn't he? I think so, Wade said, tightening the latch on the door. Then I should run. No, Wade said quietly, turning toward her. You should stay. You didn't do anything wrong. But I brought danger to your home. He looked out at the hills beyond the window. I lost this place a long time ago. You didn't bring nothing that wasn't already out there. She stepped closer, the firelight warming her face. You're risking a lot, Wade. He met her eyes. Steady. So are you, just by standing here. Something about that made her soften, just a little. She reached into the bag and pulled out the strip of dried apple, bit off a corner, and smiled faintly for the first time since he found her. I forgot how this tasted, she whispered, and for a moment, the storm outside their lives seemed far away. But later that night, As Wade sat on the porch cleaning his rifle, he saw Itchus a flicker across the ridge again, a shadow ducking behind rock. Watching, he exhaled slow. The past was coming. Not just hers. His too. Wade was a man of habit. He folded his shirts the same way every time, cut firewood in clean stacks, and kept his past tucked away in the bottom drawer of the desk that hadn't seen ink in years. He never opened it, not since the winter that took everything. But that morning, he came in from checking the traps and found Rose standing there, the drawer half open, a small photograph in her hand. It was old, faded at the corners. A woman and a little boy, both smiling wide, caught in the kind of sunlight that only shows up in memory. "I didn't mean to snoop," Rose said, not looking up. "I was looking for matches." Wade took a slow breath. "Don't keep matches in there. I know that now." He didn't take the photo from her hand, didn't tell her to put it back. Just stood there, in the silence that stretched to long. "She's beautiful," Rose said softly, tracing the woman's face with her thumb. "Is that your wife?" He nodded once. Was then the boy? His jaw tightened. "My son." Rose looked up at him. Her voice was gentle, but steady. "What happened?" Wade stared past her, eyes glassy. "They died. 6 winters ago. Fever hit the valley. I was out hunting, came back too late." Rose's fingers curled slightly around the edge of the photo. "And you've been out here alone ever since?" "Mostly." He reached for the photo, then, careful, like it might fall apart, he set it back in the drawer and closed it. Rose stepped back, her eyes filled with something that looked a lot like grief, not for herself this time, but for him. "I thought I had lost everything," she whispered. "But I don't know if I could have survived that." Wade didn't answer, just poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed one to her. They drank in silence. But it was a different kind of quiet now, one where 2 people carried sorrow together, even if neither one said it out loud. Later, she helped him in the shed, sawing wood, moving supplies. She moved slower than usual, like the weight of his story hadn't quite settled yet. Then, while nailing up a loose board, she turned to him suddenly. "Wade." He looked up from the workbench. "Do you ever feel like maybe we weren't meant to survive those things? Like maybe the part that lived through it isn't really us anymore?" He leaned on the post, thinking. "Sometimes. But then I see you, out here swinging an axe and eating dried apples like you haven't just come back from hell. And I think maybe the part that survived is the part that matters most." Rose's eyes shimmered. She blinked quickly and nodded. That night, over stew and firelight, Wade caught her humming something, a soft, broken tune he didn't recognize, but it made the walls feel warmer. Then, as he set a log on the fire, she said, "Wade, yeah, if something happens, if he finds me here, promise you won't let him take me alive." The fire popped sharply. Bot turned slowly. His voice was low and certain. "Ain't no one talking you. Not anymore." She watched him a long while, then nodded once and whispered, "Then maybe I can sleep tonight." The wind shifted on the 5th day. Wade felt it in his bones before he saw the clouds rolling in low, heavy things that made the whole sky feel closer. The air smelled like dust and trouble. He was fixing the fence out back when the first sound reached him, not footsteps, not hoofs, but a whistle. Slow, sharp, a tune he hadn't heard in over a decade. He froze, hammer mid-swing. The last time he heard that whistle, he was wearing a badge and bleeding on a saloon floor in Elridge County. The man who whistled it was named Coulter Briggs, a bounty hunter, who used charm like a knife and left folks emptier than he found him. Wade had helped run him out years ago, after what he did to a girl in town. They never caught him. Just whispers and burned barns in his wake. Wade set the hammer down gently, wiped his hands, and walked back toward the cabin. Inside, Rose was cleaning beans at the table, sleeves rolled up, her hair tied back in a way that made her look less like a victim and more like someone slowly remembering who she used to be. "You hear that?" he asked, voice low. She nodded. "Once, that whistle. I heard it. Back when he found me." Wade's stomach turned. His name Coulter. Her face went pale. "Yes." He stepped to the window, eyes scanning the horizon. "Then he's not just cumin for you. He's cumin for me too." Rose stood slowly. "Why?" "Because I put a bullet in his shoulder once and left him in the mud. Thought he'd bleed out. Guess I was wrong." She moved toward him, voice calm but urgent. "We can ride. Now leave before he gets closer." But Wade didn't move. Running just gives him another reason to chase. Men like him, they feed off fear. You stand your ground. Sometimes they flinch. But what if he doesn't? She asked. Wade finally looked at her. Then we make sure this place ain't easy to take. Together, they checked the locks, boarded the back window. He gave her the shotgun, showed her how to load it, hold it, where to stand if she needed cover. She listened without blinking, as if she'd already decided something inside her. At dusk, the fire cracked low. The kettle steamed. Wade sat at the table with a piece of leather, slowly oiling the revolver he hadn't touched in years. Rose stirred. The stew. Hands, steady now. Then, like a shadow drawn from memory, a voice came from just outside the door. Evening. Wade. Long time. Wade stood, but didn't open the door. Coulter, that your girl in there? The man called, voice oily with false kindness. She looks like the type to wander off. Figured I'd come collect. You've got no claim on her, Wade said coldly. Coulter laughed. Oh, you and I both know claims, just a matter of what you can hold on to. Wade pulled back the curtain. He could see him now, lean, dressed in black, hat tilted low. The kind of man who smiled before he did something unforgivable. I ain't letting you in, Wade said. Coulter stepped forward one pace. Then, you better be ready when I come knocking. Wade's hand gripped the revolver tighter. But before he could speak, Rose stepped beside him, shotgun in her arms, eyes burning. You already took everything from me once, she said, loud enough for Coulter to hear. You're not gonna do it again. Coulter paused. For just a second, the smirk faded. I see she's got some fire left, he muttered. That's cute. Then he turned and walked off into the dark, boots crunching slow across gravel. Wade didn't relax. Not yet. Not until the night passed and the stars blinked out and the sky turned gold again. But in the quiet that followed, Rose touched Wade's hand. Just for a moment. I'm not afraid anymore, she whispered. He nodded, without looking at her. Good, we're gonna need that. What would you do if the person who broke you came back? Smiling. Would you run? Or stand tall beside someone who finally sees your strength? Share your thoughts below, and don't miss the next part. Because come morning, the past won't be knocking. It's kicking the door in. Wade didn't sleep that night. And neither did Rose. The cabin stayed dark, except for the flicker of firelight, casting slow-moving shadows on the wooden walls, as if the ghosts of old lives were pacing just outside. He sat by the window, rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the ridge. She curled up near the hearth, shotgun close, wrapped in the coat he gave her that first night. They didn't speak much. Words felt like dry leaves in a place already too brittle with fear. But somewhere near dawn, when the night had gone so quiet it started ringing in the ears, Wade heard it hooves. Just one horse. Slow. No urgency. No charge. Just the steady rhythm of someone who knew they were being watched, but didn't care. He stood, nodded once at Rose, and stepped outside. The morning was gray, the sky smeared with the kind of light that never quite wakes up. And there he was again, Coulter Briggs. Same black coat, same smirk. But something was different. The man riding behind him wasn't one of his gang. He was young, couldn't have been more than 16. With a scared look on his face and his hands tied in front of him, Wade's stomach sank. What's this? He called out. Coulter pulled his horse to a lazy stop about 20 yards out. A gift, he said smoothly. Call it incentive. Boy tried to sneak out of town last night, asking questions. One of my men brought him to me. Figured you'd want to know what kind of visitors you attract. Wade's grip on the rifle tightened. Let him go. Coulter cocked his head. Say, please. Before Wade could answer, Rose stepped up beside him, calm, her voice steady. You're running out of games, Coulter. You're not the storm you think you are. He laughed. That right, Rose. Seems to me you remember exactly what kind of man I am. She didn't flinch. Yeah, I remember. I remember the coward who chained me because he couldn't stand someone telling him no. The young man on the second horse looked up, eyes wide. Coulter's grin cracked just slightly. Tell you what, Coulter said. I'll give you the boy. If she comes with me. Wade stepped forward. You're not making deals. Not here. Then shoot me, Coulter said, lifting his arms out wide. But just know, I got 2 more men coming up from behind those hills. You kill me, they burn this place down before supper. It was Rose who moved first, not to run, not to plead, but to reach into her coat pocket. She pulled out something, small and silver. A locket. She held it up, and Wade watched as Coulter's face changed just a flicker. But real. You remember this? She asked. Coulter stared at it, like it burned. Where'd you get that? You gave it to your sister. The night before you disappeared. Wade turned to her. Your sister. Rose's voice was calm. He told me I reminded him of her. Always said she was soft, too kind, said I had her eyes. She glanced at Wade. I didn't know it was literal. Not until I saw the initials inside. CB2AB. Wade looked back at Coulter. He didn't smirk now. Didn't move. You had a sister? Wade asked. Coulter's jaw twitched. She's dead. No, Rose said. She left you. Because of what you became. Something cracked then, not out loud. Not in wood or bone, but in the space between who Coulter thought he was and what had just been said. The boy behind him pulled at the reins, as if sensing the shift. I said let him go, Wade repeated, voice low and sure. And this time, Coulter did. Just like that. He cut the rope from the boy's hands and gave the horse a gentle slap on the flank. The kid galloped off fast, dust kicking up behind him. Coulter didn't follow. Just sat there on his horse, staring at Rose like he couldn't remember where he was anymore. You don't get to rewrite what you did, she said quietly, but you don't have to keep doing it. Coulter turned his horse slowly, said nothing, and rode off into the hills. Wade lowered his rifle. Rose exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. The past had come, but it hadn't stayed. The day after Coulter left, the sky opened up. Not with rain, this desert didn't cry easy, but with light. Clean, golden, warm in a way that felt earned. The cabin, once shadowed and wary, now stood in the sunlight like it had nothing to hide. Wade rose early, as always, but didn't reach for his rifle. Instead, he stepped out with a mug of coffee and sat on the porch, boots on the rail, watching the land breathe. Rose was already up to. She'd been quiet since the standoff, but not with fear. More like a stillness had settled into her bones. The kind that comes after you've finally stopped running. That morning, Wade caught her standing by the front window, fingertips resting against the boards he'd nailed up days ago. She turned to him. Can I take these down? He nodded. They don't need to be there anymore. She smiled small, but Reland began prying them loose. One by one. No rush. Just steady hands and careful work. By mid-morning, the window was bare again, letting in all that new light. She stood there, bathed in it, her face turned toward the hills like someone seeing them for the first time. Later, they worked the land together. Not much grew out here, but Wade had coaxed a few squash vines to cling to life, and she helped him water the roots. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The silence had changed. No longer a weight, but a comfort. Over dinner, she stirred her stew and said quietly, I've been thinking about where I'd go next. Wade looked up but didn't speak. I don't really have people, she went on. Not anymore. And I don't want to disappear again. I'm tired of being a ghost. He let that sit for a moment, then said, You're not a ghost. She smiled gently, eyes never leaving the fire. Then I guess I need a place to stop drifting. A long pause stretched between them, soft and full. She looked up. Wade, could I stay? He didn't answer right away. Not because he didn't want her there, but because something inside him had waited too long to hear those words. And now that they were real, he didn't want to rush them. You want to stay? He asked. I think I already have, she said. And that's when Wade knew this wasn't just a shelter for her anymore. It was a place being rebuilt. For both of them, the next morning, he found her sweeping the porch, humming that broken tune again. But this time, it didn't sound broken. It sounded like it was mending itself one soft note at a time. The days passed, softer now. The kind of days where the light stays longer, the silence feels earned, and even the birds seem to sing with less urgency. Rose had settled into the cabin like a song, finding its chorus familiar, right, and needed. She hung herbs in the window, mended the curtains, and added a touch of something to the stew that Wade never could figure out. But damn, if it didn't taste like home. One afternoon, while sweeping beneath the porch, she struck something hard with the broom handle. At first, she thought it was just a rock. But as she dug through the dirt, her fingers brushed against old wood. A small box, tin-reinforced, weather-worn. With rust along the hinges and a faded brass latch, she brought it inside and placed it on the table. Wade saw it and froze. You know this? She asked gently. He nodded. It's mine, was mine. You buried it, didn't want to remember. She didn't open it. Just slid it toward him. Maybe it's time you did. He stared at it for a long time before reaching out. The latch creaked. Inside was a stack of old papers, letters, folded maps, and a tin star wrapped in cloth. A sheriff's badge. Rose's eyes widened. You were Law. Wade nodded slowly. Before everything. She picked up one of the letters. Careful not to tear it. The handwriting was neat, delicate. From your wife. He gave a soft nod. She wrote to me when I was riding circuits. Kept everyone. Rose read a line aloud. Come home soon. The boy asks for you every night. He's learning to ride like you taught him. Her voice cracked, and she set the letter down. Thought burying it would bury the pain, Wade said, staring into the box. But all I did was leave it to rot in the dark. Rose reached across the table, placing her hand gently on his. Then let's bring it into the light. They spent the afternoon going through the box together. She read aloud while he added context in quiet fragments. How his son used to chase rabbits in the yard. How his wife used to sing while grinding corn. The time they rode out together during a summer rainstorm just to see the river swell. And then, there was a map hand-drawn, marked with small X's. These are old graves, Wade murmured. Folks I buried when no one else would. Rose traced the ink with her finger. You were good, Wade. You were still trying, even after the world stopped making sense. He looked at her then. Really looked. So were you. They packed the box back up. But this time, Wade didn't bury it. He placed it on the shelf beside the fireplace. Beside the photograph Rose had cleaned and framed his wife, his boy, both smiling under the sky. That night, they didn't speak much. But when Rose stood to go to bed, she paused in the doorway and said, Thank you for showing me who you were. And who you still are. Wade watched her disappear down the hall. Then he turned toward the fire, the badge glinting faintly in the light, and whispered to himself, Maybe that man ain't gone after all. The wind that morning was gentler than usual. It came down from the canyon, slow and warm, the kind of breeze that carried memory instead of dust. Wade saddled the horse without saying much. Rose packed a small bundle, just a tin of biscuits, 2 canteens, and a folded piece of cloth she didn't let him see. When they set out, neither spoke for a long while. They didn't need to. They both knew where they were going. The graveyard was a quiet patch on the northern ridge, hidden behind a stand of juniper trees that only grew thick, where the spring used to bubble up in better years. Wade hadn't been there since the stones were nuisance. The ground was still fresh and soft, and everything inside him was still raw. The trail was narrow. The horse moved slow, careful. Rose rode behind him, her face half-shadowed beneath her hat, but he could tell she was watching the land, taking it all in. She was good at that, seeing things fully, even the ones folks tried to hide. When they reached the top, Wade dismounted first, helped her down. They stood there for a long moment, staring at the 2 markers, weather-worn but still standing. Just wood crosses, carved by hand. No names. He hadn't had the heart to chisel them in. Rose stepped forward, knelt slowly, and placed the folded cloth between the stones. It was a piece of her old dress, the one she'd been wearing when he found her chained in the desert. Torn, dirty, a symbol of who she'd been, and what she survived. I don't know if this is right, she said softly, but it feels like something should be left here. Something broken, but honest. Wade watched her, his throat tight. I didn't know them, she whispered, but they gave me you, and you gave me a second chance. She stayed there for a while, eyes closed, lips moving in something too soft to hear. A prayer, maybe, or just a quiet thank you. When she stood again, she turned to Wade. You should say something. He swallowed, Pod took off his hat, and stepped between the 2 graves. I never knew how to say goodbye, he murmured, so I didn't. I just left everything buried, and told myself it was for the best. But I was wrong. I think you'd want me to try again. His voice caught, but he kept going. This woman here, she saved me. In a way I didn't think was possible. And if I've got anything left to give this world, it's because she reminded me there's still good in it. He placed his hand on one of the crosses. I miss you. And I hope you'd be proud. The wind kicked up, lifting a bit of dust into the morning light. It wasn't loud, just enough to make the trees whisper like they were listening. Wade and Rose stood there until the sun reached high. Then they rode down slow, back toward the cabin. That night, Wade lit a lantern and set the dinner table with care. Rose brought out a clean cloth and 2 tin plates. They didn't say grace, but they sat across from each other like something sacred had passed between them. After they ate, Rose stood by the fire and looked around the room. The dried herbs, the photograph, the badge, the brush on the shelf. Signs of a life once lost, now gently returning. She turned to Wade. If tomorrow, you asked me to stay, for good, I'd say yes. He didn't smile. Not fully. But the look in his eyes was something stronger than happiness. It was belonging. You're already home, he said. The rains came a week later. Not heavy, not fierce, just a slow, steady soak that fell in soft rhythms against the tin roof. Out here, rain wasn't just weather, it was a blessing, a reminder that even the driest land could be coaxed into life if you waited long enough. Wade stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching the droplets race down the railing. The old wood smelled richer in the damp, and the dust that had clung to everything for years finally felt washed clean. Inside, Rose was humming again. This time the tune was whole. He couldn't name it, but it felt like something he used to know long ago, when his boy still chased rabbits and his wife sang in the mornings. The land responded to little green shoots, began pushing up between the cracks near the well. The squash vines thickened. Birds returned to the rafters like they'd never left. They'd planted a garden together. Rose and Wade. Not much, just enough to hope. Rows of beans, some onions, a few wildflower seeds she found wrapped in old paper. Every morning, they checked on it like parents learning patience. One evening, as they sat outside under the stars, Rose leaned her head on Wade's shoulder. "Do you ever think we were supposed to find each other?" Wade took his time answering. "I don't know about supposed to, but I think we were both lost in different ways. And maybe some people don't save each other so much as they recognize the same kind of broken and decide to carry it together." She was quiet for a while, just listening to his heartbeat. "I never told you my full name," she said. He smiled. "You didn't have to. It's Anna Rose Bennett. My mama called me Annie. Only Coulter ever called me Rose." He turned toward her gently. "Then maybe it's time you picked what name you want to go by." She thought about it, then whispered, "I think I'll stay Rose. But this time, because I choose it, not because he gave it to me." Wade nodded, proud of the way she owned the name now, like a blade reforged. Later that week, they rode into town together for supplies. Folks noticed, some whispered, but Wade kept his head high, and Rose met every glance with a steady gaze. She wasn't hiding anymore. She bought a piece of blue fabric from the general store and said she might try sewing again. Wade bought nails, seed packets, and a second chair for the porch. At night, they sat side by side, rocking slow, saying little. The desert stretched wide around them, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of stories, of silences, of things mending. One morning, Rose opened the front door and gasped. Out beyond the garden, in a patch of earth that had once been nothing but dust, wildflowers had bloomed. Yellow and violet, small and trembling, but real, alive. She called Wade over. Eyes full, he looked down, then up at her. "They waited," he said. She nodded, "like we did." Then he reached out, took her hand, and held it like a promise, not rushed, not loud, but certain. Some stories don't end with fireworks or loud declarations. Some end quietly with two souls who survived, who chose healing, and who made a home where the wild things bloom. If you stayed with this story from the beginning, thank you, truly. Share in the comments what part stayed with you, and if it moved something in your heart, don't keep it to yourself. There's someone out there waiting for a little light. Maybe today, that light is you.